Hello, everyone. My name is Ryland Adzich, and I'm a part of Bookworm Global. And today I will be doing an interview with Farrell Podgorsek. She is the librarian at Horace Mann Elementary School, and she has been with the school for 16 years. So my first question for you is, why did you want to become a librarian?
Well, I never thought about being a librarian growing up, and I really wish I had. I've always loved books. When I was in elementary school, I was always the class librarian, but it never dawned on me to have that as a career. When my kids were in school, I wanted to help at the school, and I ended up in the school library and was working there. And they said, "Do you want a job?" And I'm like, "Sure." And somehow that turned into 21 years later, still working as a librarian in the school district.
That's really cool. So what's the best part about your job as a librarian?
That part's easy. Working with the kids is the best part. Finding the right book for a kid, which means getting to know my students. And I'm fortunate that many of our students, if they're here, their whole elementary career, I'm their librarian. So I get to know them and their interests, and finding the books that open a student up and want them to, and make them want to read. That, when they fall in love with a book, that is by far the best feeling in the world.
Yes, books are amazing. There's just so many out there, especially authors are coming out with sequels, prequels,
Mhm.
so you can find any sort of book. And what is it like working at Horace Mann Elementary School?
It's been fun. It's my neighborhood school. So working here, I see a lot of the students both at school and in the community. Whether we run into each other at the grocery store or Target or on Halloween. So I get to see the kids grow and change and then come back and visit when they have siblings. So having that continuity has been wonderful. I've got wonderful support from my staff here. So all the kids get to come to the library during normal years and choose books and spend time just being in the library. And that's very special.
I understand libraries are a pretty cool place to be, especially at elementary school, and you have just all of these different books, and that's really your start to your reading adventure. So, how has working at your school affected you personally?
Personally, it's really opened my eyes um, to worlds and communities, lifestyles that I didn't know about before, because our school is a Title I low income school. So many of our students are low income, first, there's the second language learners. English is not their first language. Their families are just still assimilating into San Jose and into the community. And I didn't grow up that way. I grew up in a nice middle class family. So it's really opened my eyes and widened my breadth of knowledge as to what affects students in regard to their learning, to their ability to learn, their stability, whether it's in their housing or food shortage, everything that impacts their lives, because that's going to impact their academics and impact their ability to read, desire to read, time to read. And that really, so working here, the strongest thing that's happened is really, really opened up my mind.
Wow. I think it's so great to be able to just again, thank you so much for doing this interview. I of course have more questions, but it's really interesting to especially be able to talk with you about things that are happening in our own backyard. I mean, I'm here in Cupertino in San Jose. It's not like a 2 hour drive. It's in pretty close proximity to each other. So being able to have this sort of experience and do interviews like this is it's really amazing. And I'm really thankful for the impact that you make on so many young students. I'm sure you get students who are coming in like they just really want to read and try and educate themselves on just so many different topics.
That I do. But what I also get are students that, because their exposure has been limited, they don't know about all those cool topics that they can learn about. So something that I really love to do, I do it a lot through my story times and working with the whole classes, is expose them to different careers, different places around the world, different types of books, everything that they would not be exposed to, they may not come across in their daily lives. We think of it sometimes as like, well, everybody knows the beach is a half hour away, or where I am, 45 minutes. Many of my kids have never been to the beach. They've never seen a ship. They've never been to the aquariums and some of the cool places. So I try to bring a lot of that in and expose them through books, through media, through videos, to a lot of experiences. Again, a lot of opportunities, a lot of jobs, careers that they can look forward to that they may never have heard of. And that's very, very rewarding for me when I can open up a student's mind and then I hear them say, I want to be a paleontologist, or I want to be a neuroscientist. And these kids didn't know what those things were before.
As you have your job here as being a librarian, I was planning on asking it, but I think you've already addressed it. The most rewarding part of your job and just the best thing, what would you say that is, just in general, and just being where you are and being the librarian here?
Just, yeah, getting kids to fall in love with reading, or at the least for the ones who say, I don't like books, finding that book that will at least begin to draw them in. Because it's rarely that a student doesn't like reading. As long as they are able to read, often it's that they haven't found the book that they want to read yet, something that's interesting to them. And that's very rewarding when I can all of a sudden take the student who never wanted to read, and then they all of a sudden have read through the entire Wings of Fire series, all 9, 10, 11 books. And their parents come to me, it's like they never read before. So that was a student a few years ago. And it's just like, that just brings such a huge smile to my face when I can make that happen.
As a librarian, how do books impact you personally? And because you talk about books and it's just so much passion and love for books, how do books impact you?
Just like they did for my students. Even though I did have exposure and my parents took me to lots of different places, I was a very quiet kid. And I would bury myself in books. And through my books, I learned about how kids lived in all different parts of the country or the world. I learned about things going on. I'm still an avid reader, both of the books that I get from my library and adult books. I do read a lot of kid books, by the way, because how can I know what to recommend if I don't know something about the books? And even if it's not my favorite genre, I know it's going to be another student's favorite. So I need to understand them and know a little bit about the story. So I'm always learning. I'm always reading. I always have books with me everywhere. My kids always knew that, I'd be happy to wait because it would give me reading time. But yeah, it lets me escape to places. It opens my mind. It teaches me things. Reading does all that for me. And it's very empty when I don't have a book around.
Can you recall the first time or the first book that really got you inspired to keep reading and keep learning?
Oh, good question. Well, I can tell you the first book that got me to keep reading, and it's a book I read as a child, and it was through a Scholastic Book Club, little magazine, when I could buy my 10-cent books at the time. And it was called Tall and Proud, and it was a girl who was blind and jumped on a horse to rescue her family because somebody was hurting them. And that just took me into reading. I always read, I always kind of had something, but that's the book that I read over and over and made me want to read more. So that would be probably the first one I ever read that just really, really pulled me in.
That's really amazing. I think that there are just so many. I guess when I was little, I too had this sort of experience where I found that one book and just hooked me forever. It was a mystery book. It was actually the Nancy Drew. It was the Nancy Drew mystery book series. And so the first book, and I was like, oh, I want to be like her when I grow up. I want to do something I want to be a detective. But I completely understand how reading just opens your mind and it allows you to learn about all of these different places that you never thought possible to begin with. And as we close up our interview today, I'd like to ask you one last question, and that is, what message do you hope watchers of this interview will receive?
Well, I hope watchers of this video understand that access to books, and a variety of books, both in different languages, different reading levels, dramatically impacts any child's abilities to succeed in life. Reading books expands your vocabulary, opens your mind to opportunities that you never knew existed, and increases their educational levels. And without that access, we see there's plenty of studies done showing the detriment to students and to children everywhere if they don't have access to books that they're interested in, not just what the school assigns them for reading, but free choice, whether it's a nonfiction book about dinosaurs or a silly book about joke book. It doesn't matter what it is. Kids who read tend to do better. And kids who read a lot expands their minds, expands their worlds, and expands their opportunities for their entire lives. So I love what Bookworm Global is doing in making sure that all students, I keep thinking students, but it's all kids, have access to a variety of books and hopefully keep that access throughout all their young years.
Thank you so much for doing this interview with me. And thank you so much for enlightening me on all of these different reasons why reading is not only necessary, but it's just important for the growth and mindset of young children everywhere. Thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure. It's been quite a joy.